Right, imagine this. It's the 16th century. Elizabeth I is on the throne. We Brits, we're not exactly top dogs yet. Spain and Portugal, they're the big cheeses raking it in with their New World colonies. We're stuck with this damp little island. Not ideal, is it? But then something changes. We develop a taste for adventure, for spices, for gold. Who doesn't love a bit of gold? We start sending out explorers like Sir Francis Drake, a right swashbuckling character. They're off to places unknown, planting flags and claiming land for queen and country. First stop, America. Jamestown, Virginia becomes our first permanent settlement in 1607. It's a tough start, lots of hardship, but it's a foothold. And from there, things begin to snowball. We establish colonies up and down the East Coast. We're in the game now, lads. The British Empire is starting to take shape. Fast forward a century or two, the world has changed dramatically, and so has the British Empire. The British Empire, it's not a little side hustle anymore, it's a global powerhouse. What started as a series of trading posts and small colonies has now transformed into a vast empire that spans the globe. We're talking India, Australia, huge chunks of Africa, islands you've never even heard of. The British flag flies over territories in every corner of the world, from the Caribbean to the Pacific. The sun literally never sets on this thing. It's a phrase that captures the sheer scale and reach of the British Empire, a testament to its global dominance. How did we do it? Well, a few ways. One, we were ruthless. The British Empire didn't grow by being nice. We fought wars, crushed rebellions, and played our enemies against each other. We fought wars, crushed rebellions, and played our enemies against each other. Two, we were clever. We knew how to use diplomacy and strategy to our advantage, making alliances when it suited us and breaking them when it didn't. We built a powerful navy, the envy of the world. The Royal Navy was the backbone of the British Empire, protecting our trade routes and projecting our power across the seas. We established trading posts and exploited resources with ruthless efficiency. From the spices of India to the gold of Africa, we took what we wanted and made a fortune doing it. And let's not forget the East India Company. This wasn't just any trading company, it was a juggernaut that played a crucial role in the expansion of the British Empire. Now, these boys were a force of nature. They weren't just traders, they were conquerors, administrators and rulers. They started as a simple trading company, but they ended up ruling most of India. Talk about ambition. They had their own armies, their own laws, and they governed vast territories with an iron fist. They had their own armies, their own laws. They were like a state within a state, wielding immense power and influence. They were like a state within a state. The East India Company was a microcosm of the British Empire itself, a blend of commerce, military might, and political control. The 18th and 19th centuries were the British Empire's glory days. This was the era of the Industrial Revolution, when Britain became the workshop of the world, producing goods on an unprecedented scale. We were top of the pile, the undisputed rulers of the waves. Our navy was unmatched, our trade routes were secure, and our influence was felt in every corner of the globe. We were rich, powerful, and frankly a bit full of ourselves. The wealth generated by the empire fueled a golden age of British culture, science, and industry. But all good things must come to an end, right? The British Empire, like all empires before it, eventually faced decline. The world changed, and so did the balance of power. But for a time, we were the masters of the world, and our legacy still echoes through history. Now let's talk horsepower. Not the kind you find under the bonnet of a Jaguar, but the kind that fueled the Industrial Revolution. This, my friends, is where Britain really took the lead. See, we were the first to figure out that coal and steam could make machines work like never before. Factories popped up like mushrooms. We were churning out textiles, iron and goods at an astonishing rate. Suddenly, we were the workshop of the world, and who do you think gobbled up all these goods? That's right, our colonies. We shipped them everything from clothes to teacups, and they sent us back raw materials, cotton, sugar, rubber, you name it. It was a sweet deal for us, not so much for them. This industrial might gave us a massive military advantage too. We built bigger ships, better guns, and could project our power across the globe. It was the age of the British Empire, and we were driving the train, full steam ahead. Section 4, the dark side of progress, exploitation and resistance, but hold your horses. This empire, this glorious, expansive dominion, it wasn't all sunshine and roses. Far from it. While the British Empire is often celebrated for its advancements and contributions to global progress, there's a much darker narrative that runs parallel to these achievements. There's a dark side to this story, a side we can't ignore. The grandeur of the empire was built on the backs of countless individuals who suffered immensely. You see, while we were busy building our empire, we were also exploiting people on a massive scale. The labor and resources of colonized nations were ruthlessly extracted to fuel the empire's growth. We treated our colonies like cash cows, extracting resources and profits without a second thought for the people who lived there. The wealth of the empire was amassed at the expense of the colonized, who were often left impoverished and disenfranchised. Slavery, my friends, was a key part of this system. The transatlantic slave trade was a brutal and inhumane practice that saw millions of Africans torn from their homes and families. Millions of Africans were shipped across the Atlantic in horrific conditions to work on plantations in the Americas. The journey itself was a nightmare, with many not surviving the passage. It was a shameful chapter in human history, and Britain sadly played a leading role. The profits from slavery and the exploitation of colonized peoples were used to build the infrastructure and wealth of the empire. But people weren't just going to sit back and take it. The human spirit is resilient, and the oppressed found ways to resist their oppressors. There was resistance, uprisings, and rebellions. These acts of defiance were often met with brutal repression, but they were a testament to the enduring desire for freedom and justice. From the American Revolution to the Indian Mutiny, people fought back against British rule. These conflicts were driven by a deep-seated need for autonomy and self-determination. Sometimes they won, sometimes they lost, but they never stopped fighting for their freedom. The legacy of these struggles is a reminder of the cost of empire and the enduring power of the human spirit to resist oppression and seek justice. Today, many former colonies celebrate their independence and honor the sacrifices of those who fought for their freedom. These celebrations are a testament to the resilience and strength of the human spirit. It's important to remember and educate ourselves about this dark chapter in history. By understanding the past, we can work towards a more just and equitable future. The story of exploitation and resistance is not just a tale of the past. It is a lesson for the present and the future. It reminds us of the importance of standing up against injustice and working together to build a better world for all. As we move forward, let us carry the lessons of history with us. Let us honor the memory of those who suffered and fought by continuing the struggle for justice and equality in our own time. In the end, the story of exploitation and resistance is a story of hope. It is a story of the unbreakable human spirit and the enduring quest for freedom and dignity. Let us be inspired by this story and strive to create a world where exploitation is a thing of the past and resistance is no longer necessary. Section 5. Cracks in the facade, the seeds of rebellion. Now, by the 20th century, the empire was starting to show its age. Like a vintage E-type Jag, it looked good on the outside, but under the hood, things were starting to rattle. The British Empire, once a symbol of unyielding power and grandeur, was beginning to falter. The streets of London, bustling with activity, masked the underlying issues that were slowly eroding the foundation of this vast empire. The colonies, which had been the source of immense wealth and resources, were becoming increasingly restless. The facade of invincibility was cracking and the signs were becoming too obvious to ignore. World War I, a right royal mess, really shook things up. We poured everything into that fight. Men, money, resources. It left us exhausted, weakened, and deeply in debt. The trenches of Europe were filled with weary soldiers, young men who had seen the horrors of war up close. The battlefield was a grim reminder of the cost of maintaining an empire. The war had drained the British economy, and the human toll was staggering. Families across the empire mourned the loss of their loved ones, and the collective grief began to turn into a questioning of the very purpose of the empire. The war also changed the way people thought. Across the empire, people who had fought and died for Britain started asking, hang on, why are we being ruled by these blokes thousands of miles away? The seeds of rebellion were sown. In India, Africa, and the Caribbean, the call for independence grew louder. The sacrifices made by colonial soldiers were not forgotten, and their bravery became a rallying point for those who sought freedom from British rule. Protests and uprisings began to spread, and the British government found it increasingly difficult to maintain control. The idea of self-determination was taking root, and the empire's grip was loosening. And then came World War II, another global conflict, another chance for the colonies to prove their worth. Indian soldiers, for example, fought bravely alongside British troops. But the war also exposed the limits of British power. We weren't invincible. The writing was on the wall. The empire, once mighty and vast, was starting to crumble. The age of colonialism was coming to an end. The question was, could it end peacefully? The post-war period saw a surge in nationalist movements across the colonies. Leaders like Mahatma Gandhi in India and Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana became symbols of the struggle for independence. The British government, weakened by the war and facing pressure from both within and outside, had to make a choice. The transition from a colonial empire to a collection of independent nations was fraught with challenges, but it was inevitable. The seeds of rebellion had grown into a full-fledged movement for freedom, and the world was watching as the British Empire began to unravel.